So welcome everybody to Game Dev Game Love. It's a podcast for Game Dev London where I speak to other game developers about games that they love and their perspective on it as a game developer. And here we are to talk to the wonderful Nicoll Hunt. Hello.
Hey. Hi, Internet. I assume this is the Internet.
It is. Nicoll, can I ask you how long you've been in games? How long you've been developing? Tell me about your development.
It's a long storied history, my friends. I've been making games for about 20 years professionally. My first job was in 2001 for Codemasters in Leamington Spa, working on the Colin McRae Rally games. From there, I worked on a few games at Codemasters, but only the Colin McRae ones made out the door. Moved up to Scotland, worked on a bunch of games that got cancelled up at Visual Science. And then I went to Real-Time Worlds in Dundee, where I worked on a game called APB, which you may or may not have heard of, but it's primarily well known for being one of the biggest financial disasters in computer game history. We burned through about $110 million making a game which was recently voted the worst game on Xbox One, which is it's pretty impressive, really, if you think about it. But it was a cool experience nonetheless. I met lots of intelligent, brilliant people. So after that, I felt quite burned out, left the games industry for a while, came down to London, worked in post-production for movies. But man, like just the love of making games, like I just can't stay away from it. And so in my spare time, I started making like just little indie games, like just for me mainly. But I slowly kind of picked up speed, and eventually, like it kind of became clear that there was a potential career there if I wanted to kind of start my own company and make my own games, and so that's what I did. And so the first kind of big game I released was a game called Fist of Awesome, which you may have heard of. It's a time traveling lumberjack 'em up where you play as a man called Tim Burr who has to travel through time, punching bears in the face to save humanity. It's such a good game, man. I was heavily inspired by Streets of Rage, which isn't the game I've chosen, but may become relevant later on. And that was like a really big success for me. And so from there, I ran I Fight Bears, which was the company I started. And for 5 years, made a variety of games, including 8-Bit Water Slide, Maximum Car, Brewtown, a few other little projects along the way. And 2 years ago, I got approached by Space Ape Games in London, who quite literally made me an offer I couldn't refuse, to come work on potentially like the biggest game of my entire life, and I accepted. And so I've been at Space 8 for 2 years now, and loving it.
That sounds amazing. What a journey. So tell us about the game you've chosen to talk about tonight.
So the game I've chosen is a game that kind of came into my life heavily when I was around maybe 13, 14 years old. I'd heard about it before then, but I started playing it like quite heavily around that time, and that's when it was released on the Super Nintendo. The game, as I'm sure you're more than accustomed with, is Street Fighter 2.
Classic.
And it's honestly like it was one of those gaming moments where like, because I'd heard about it for so long, it was this game that had been like it became legendary like in the arcades. And it was like, oh, there's going to be a home version, and like because I lived in a small town in Scotland, like there was no arcade machines there. There was like one chip shop had like a Double Dragon machine, and that was it. Like that thought of actually having like Street Fighter 2 available to play was like unbelievable. And yeah, and so when one of my friends got it when it first came out on like Japanese import, and it was running his house all of the time. It was such a good game. Like I became obsessed with it, and then like I finally got like the whole UK version for my own house, and I played it to death, man. Like that is a game that I became just utterly besotted with. Like every single secret, every single kind of like combo, every single like different way you can use the characters. I had like an action replay card thing, so you could kind of like you'd have like Blanca on screen, but you'd press a button and you say no, it's Chun-Li, and suddenly you had like Blanca doing fireballs and stuff. Oh man, like I just became besotted with that game. It was my world. It was the only game, and from that moment to this very day, that I was better than everyone else at. Like all my friends, I was so obsessed that I could just destroy everyone. Like there was no challenge at one point because it was so much better than everyone else. This is before the internet. Like if the internet was around then, I wouldn't have been like dominating so heavily, as I found out since I've been playing it online recently. But yeah, like it was such a formative experience for me. Like I just loved it so much. Like the artwork, the design, just the audacity of it. Like the way it took like Street Fighter, which was basically a mediocre arcade game with it. Like,
Yeah.
originally we're known for its kind of gimmicky buttons, like the pressure sensitive buttons. How they took that and created Street Fighter 2, like it's such a leap. Like it's just, man, it's incredible, incredible. Like
Yeah.
literally jaw dropping.
I have to agree. I was around at the time as well when we had Street Fighter 2 in the arcades, and it was such a phenomenon around then. And it's definitely in my top 3 games of all time. So I'm so happy you picked Street Fighter 2. We can wax lyrical about it all day long. Um, when you were playing Street Fighter 2, were you a game developer of any kind then?
No, this was maybe about 2 years before I even developed my first kind of like homebrew title. So around the time I had the Super Nintendo, and that was it. So obviously I couldn't make games with the Super Nintendo, but a few years later I got an Amiga, and the Amiga was when I first started like going, you can make games? What? Get out! And I made like some really really terrible games. But that was like 2 years after Street Fighter. But one of the games I did try to make was a Street Fighter 2 clone. Um, and it was like it was like because I made a few games and they're all terrible. Like if you really care enough, you can search the internet and find at least one of them. But the Street Fighter one never got off the ground because I almost instantly realized how much work is required to make a game like Street Fighter 2. Like even just to have like one character on screen walking left, right, and punching was like so far beyond my capabilities. It's like how do you like have like all these moves and then the supers and then there's AI and it's like oh my god, like this is just pure witchcraft. It gave me like a real what's the word um like just an awe at the people who must have created it, like how much like how top of their like art form they were. It was just unbelievable.
I was saying for me actually, we had an Atari ST when Street Fighter came out, and at the chip shop we had down the road actually had Street Fighter 1, so we played a lot of that more than Street Fighter 2. Even though Street Fighter 2 had come out, we didn't have much access to it to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So we played a lot of Street Fighter 1, and in Street Fighter 1 the special moves are a lot harder to pull out. You have to be very precise. So on my Atari ST, I stole the sprites from Street Fighter 1 game because they weren't compressed, they were just a picture file. I stole those sprites and I made a special move simulator. So I just practice fireballs over and over again.
This is such a Quang story.
It's just great. Like I said, when you got those 16-bit computers, so the Amiga and Atari ST, it opens a whole new world to you. Like you can make stuff, and obviously you make stuff that you have a love for. And Street Fighter 2 is obviously one of the things we had a love for.
Yeah.
So you now have an Amiga a couple of years on, and you're loving Street Fighter 2, and now you're starting to make games. Do you start seeing Street Fighter 2 in a different light?
Yeah, well, like I say, like I started to see like just how much work and dedication must have gone into creating it. And like I played a lot of other games as well at the same time, like because it became as a result of Street Fighter 2 my obsession. Like I played every single fighting game that came out on the Super Nintendo. None of them came like particularly close, but like it was still interesting to see. Like I used to love like Mortal Kombat, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fighting game was pretty
Oh yeah,
good.
Tournament Fighters is
And
great.
my memory thought it was pretty good anyway. I'm not sure if it actually was pretty good. Um, but yeah, like yeah, it didn't really affect my personal development as a developer per se because it just felt unattainable. It was so far beyond what I thought I could ever hope to achieve that that it was like just as unattainable holy grail way in the distance. Like I'm never going to get there. Like I'm not even going to consider it. And so like all my first games were like just really basic shoot 'em up kind of games. Like there's nothing but like the kind of design intricacies of something like Street Fighter.
I probably actually for those people who have been living under the rock and never actually heard of Street Fighter 2, it may be worth actually describing the game. How would you describe Street Fighter 2 in your own words?
Street Fighter 2 is a one-on-one fighting game. Its most basic sense, it's like one character versus another character in a 2D plane, with a variety of punches and kicks and special moves. The special moves which are activated with a variety of different techniques, from like kind of making the joystick down and then sliding it forward and pressing punch, or to hold back to charge, then forward with a punch or a kick. There's quite a few different ways of doing it. Like basically, like a lot of it's like the more powerful the move, the more difficult it is to actually pull off. Um, Zangief is Pile Driver is the famous one because you've got to do a full 360 rotation of the joystick and then hit a button to like kind of activate it, and the computer can do it like instantly every single time. Me, even now, but like like well now especially, but like back when I was like 14, I played it every single day. It was still freaking rock hard, man. You're like, and all you do is just jump in the air and get smacked out of whoever you're playing against. But if you manage to pull off, it's so sweet because you like grab the cards, you fly up in the air, whirl around, slam down the ground. Like it takes like half their energy or something. And so that's the great thing about Street Fighter 2. It's all about strategy. Like, do you use like the quick, easy technique, or do you use the kind of hard one, which may leave you more open and vulnerable, but it's guaranteed to like take like so much more health off your opponent. And it's like it's the first kind of esport game in my eyes. Like it's the first game where like it was really like a game of skill, and you could see people playing if they were good at the game, or if they were bad at the game, like how experienced they were, like what techniques they were using. It wasn't like luck or like button bashing. It was pure skill. Like if someone was good at Street Fighter 2, you couldn't beat them by pure luck. Mortal Kombat, yeah, you can like whack the buttons, you might get lucky, you might beat them. Street Fighter 2, no way. It was pure skill. Yeah, that's why it's special.
I quite enjoy how you describe that as a game developer. Like when you ask someone else who doesn't develop games what Street Fighter is, it'll be a very high level description of it. But you went very game developer on that, which is great. Which is perfect. It's what we want. I think it's one of those games. I've always described it as like playing chess at high speed. It's high speed chess. Yeah. You have to think ahead, try and anticipate what the other player is doing, and then you have to react very, very quickly, and it requires a level of dexterity as well to play the game. So even though your brain wants to do something, your hands don't always keep up. How many times have you tried to do a move and it's never come out because your hands just weren't responding correctly? It's such a great game in that respect.
Yeah, it's one of the. It's like a game you've got to train for. Like you're not naturally good at it. You need to train your body and your mind, so like you know what moves to do, and you have the skills to pull them off. Like, oh man, just can be talking about it gets me all excited again. The problem is like I've played it recently because I got like one of those Mister FPGA emulation device things, and so like I spent the last 4 weeks or something. I'm going to show you actually. I spent the last 4 weeks building this bad boy. So like this is just an arcade stick. So I got like an MDF case, and then I bought all the SandWAD parts and hooked it all up and got a USB zero lag thing. It's so geeky, so good. Just purely so I could actually, for the first time in my life, play Street Fighter 2 as it's intended at home, like basically perfectly on my big flat screen TV. And yeah, I'm terrible at it. I'm so bad. Like I absolutely adore it. I'm like loving every second of it. But I can't do Zangief's like Pile Driver, not a chance. Even like doing like dragon punches, like it's like 50-50 to be honest, if I get it or not.
Yeah.
But it's so good. It's so I feel like I'm like 14 again, just like kind of getting back to the basics and
one of those things where
get those skills up.
It's one of the things, if you can't pull the move off, you have to then decide, is it worth the risk? And when you were played in the arcades, you put your money in the machine, and that was your credit. So the risk and reward of winning and losing was much higher. Like if you play at home, you can play all day long, and you just press restart and you start again. But in the arcade, you have to put money into the machine for every go you play. So
it's two things. Like one, it's the money. So like if you play and you lose, well, you've lost that money. You've got to pay again if you're going to play again. But you've played against another person, and they're just looking at you, what'd you do that for? You're terrible at this game. Like, oh, I feel so humiliated.
Yeah, there's a huge level of chaos. Yeah.
That's like that was thing like that's one thing I don't get like playing at home is like the kind of the social interaction of playing Street Fighter. Like whether it's like around someone's house in Super Nintendo or in the actual arcades, against like random people. It's a special thing to rock up. No one knows who you are. Play the game and you wipe them out. Like that's just the best feeling. You're like king of the world at that point.
For sure, definitely.
Let's what that's like.
Oh yeah, I spent many years playing Street Fighter. I played Street Fighter semi-pro, so entered many competitions.
Oh my God.
So I spent a lot of time in the arcades playing Street Fighter.
Dang, son.
But I was lucky. I lived in London, so we had arcades, and people would travel from all over to come play in the arcades in London. So you got a good variety of players. you generally find you're only as good as the people you're playing. So if
Yeah.
you're at home and you play with your brothers or your friends, if you beat all of them, you're only as good as they are. Then you leave your town,
I
go
know this
somewhere
all too
else,
well.
and it's a different story completely.
This is why I hate the internet. I used to think I was good at Street Fighter, and then the internet came along. It's like, oh, because I got Street Fighter 4. This is like when it first happened. I got Street Fighter 4. It's like, it's online. It's like, oh, this is brilliant. I'm going to play Street Fighter again. I'm going to get really good. I'm going to beat all these like losers on the internet. And like the first week, yeah, I was pretty good. I chose Blanc as my main. I was like kicking ass. I was like, no, this is pretty good. I still got it. And then a week later, it must be when everyone like who was like 14 kind of like actually kind of, oh, I know how to play this now. And they kind of got the grips of it. Just destroyed. Like every single game, just the floor was wiped with me. I was like, what is happening? Just like put it in the drawer and never played that again. Stupid game. Must be faulty in some way.
It's, so let's dive a little deeper. And again, as game developers, let's talk about the intricacies. How can I say that word? Intricacies. That's the word. Of the game itself. Let's break it down and talk about, from a game developer's point of view, what makes it so great. What's that magic sauce in there?
I think it's attention to detail mainly. Like that comes in a lot of different ways. Like obviously like the art is obvious. Like the art's wonderful, animation and stuff. It's all great. But the thing that makes it special is the gameplay. And that's not just by pure luck. Like that, every single element of that has been finely crafted. When I was making Fist of Awesome, like I'd never made a fighting game before. For anyone who doesn't know, Fist of Awesome is this like kind of scrolling beat 'em up game I made. And I had no idea how to make a beat 'em up. I just wanted to make one, and so I had to kind of go back to basics and work out like how do you make a beat 'em up? Like what are the kind of the core jigsaw pieces that you need to fit together to make this game work? And one of the most kind of like simple sounding, but one of the most complex to get right is just like animation hitboxes. So like for every frame of animation, you say, right, which part of this character is now kind of like an attack? If the other player gets hit by this bit, where is it? And like how long does that last? And how strong is that kind of like that hit? And does that change over the course of the animation? Like if they hit early on, is that as strong as when they hit at the end? And it very quickly becomes like incredibly complex. And even just writing the system to support this is like complicated. But then you've got to create all the assets, you've got to create all the art and animation, and then overlay all of this design data on top of it, where these hitboxes are, how long they last for, like what the impact is, how much of a delay does that, if it connects to the other player, how long does that other player like become unresponsive for? And everything's got to be balanced. Like all these different moves and like hits have got to be balanced. So like someone can't like just like if they get one hit and that's it, they can just keep fighting and the other person doesn't have a chance to kind of recover. It's so hard. It's like it's a really, really complicated thing to do, to manage and to balance. And that for me is where Street Fighter 2 kind of stepped up and just showed everyone how it's done, because no game before that came close. And like I played fighting games a long time before like Street Fighter 2 came along, like games like Gear Kung Fu and stuff, like all these kind of like the original kind of like one-on-one fighting games. And you can see like a lot of the lineage all the way through Street Fighter 2, but Street Fighter 2 is such a jump. Like they must have played all of the existing ones before that. Obviously, they played Street Fighter itself, but all the other ones like Kung Fu, like all these are really old, kind of like old school fighting games, and like looked and seen where like their deficiencies were and went, you know what? We're not going to have that in Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 is going to be different. It's going to be better. And they solved all these problems. Like it was, I can't even I just can't imagine how much work it must have been to like create something that never existed before, like to solve all these existing problems and create something which is on such a higher level. It's just wonderful.
There's a version of Street Fighter 2, the arcade ROM, which has been hacked, that you can use, that shows all the hitboxes, which is wonderful, and they use that for training a lot. I don't know if I think some of the newer Street Fighter games have hitbox visibility.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do.
And that just helps you understand how it works, because you could play Street Fighter with just hitboxes. It wouldn't look as good, but when it comes down to it, that's what it is. It's a bunch of hitboxes and timing when you're active, when you're not active, the recovery timing, the pushback, and all this. And as you said, getting those timings right is so difficult. I understand the developers for Street Fighter, they talked to the animators, and they had a real back and forth about timings and animation, because obviously you want it to look good. but you also want it to be realistic, and you also want it to be balanced. And said, this heavy kick has to take this long to come out. How long does it hit for? Then how long does it take to retract? And how long are you vulnerable for? And if it hits, how hard does it hit, and so forth. And I just say, and being able to do combos. One of the big things I understand is the combo system. Being able to do a jump kick, a sweep, and a fireball, where the fireball cancels the sweep halfway through into a combo, was actually happened by accident, because they found special moves were too difficult to do, so they put a bit of leniency in them, and it became a frame cancel. So you do a sweep fireball. And I remember the first time I was asked, "Can you do a fly kick sweep fireball?" I'm like, "Sure, I can do one of those. Jump, fly kick, do a sweep, do a fireball." And there's like, no, that's not how it works. You have to do it in a combo, so the other player can't block it. And this is like, what? How is this? But yeah, that even though it was by accident, it's become a core part of Street Fighter gameplay and fighting games in general.
Yeah, it's interesting how much stuff like in Street Fighter 2 wasn't exactly intended, but became part of what made Street Fighter 2 so good. And then that in turn became the building blocks of modern fighting games, like the combo system you just mentioned. That's a core part of every single fighting game nowadays. Every single fighting game has a combo counter that comes up as soon as you start getting 2 or 3 hits in a row. And that all came from Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 is the granddaddy of every single modern fighting game. And that's an amazing thing to say. There's very few games that can, for example, it's the Mario of platform games. Every single platform game owes something to Mario. Every single fighting game owes something to Street Fighter 2.
Did you put a combo system into Fist of Awesome?
I did. It was considerably simpler, both in scope and implementation. But there's a very basic combo system in there. You could do punch, and then there was not one, I didn't have 6 different types of punch or kick or anything. But if you just keep punching, it will alternate, and then you can grab and do throws and stuff. So yeah, it all came from Street Fighter 2, but heavily cut down. And Fist of Awesome was also massively inspired by Final Fight and Streets of Rage as well. So Final Fight itself, of course, having some kind of history in Street Fighter history as well, as I'm sure you're aware.
Sure. Yeah, so as I understand, Final Fight was meant to be the original sequel for Street Fighter 1.
That's correct. Yeah, it was originally going to be called Street Fighter 89. Is that right?
89, very possibly 89. Sounds about right. Internet, I'm sure the internet would tell us. But I know in Final Fight you can do 2 light punches, turn around, punch the other way, and turn back, and then do another 2 punches. And the timing for that will keep the bad player in hit stun, so you can actually kill anyone in doing that timing. And obviously that's before Street Fighter 2 came out. And if they had something like that in Street Fighter 2, that would be completely unfair. So I'm sure they were very aware of something like that, and have had to make it so obviously there's the pushback and the recovery, so you can have some locked and hit stun.
Yeah, there's an interesting GDC talk about I can't remember who does it. I think it's someone called Alex who works at Riot Games, and they talks about cursed problems in game design, and one of them is a very kind of common game design you might hear from a junior game designer is oh, we should make Final Fight but with Street Fighter 2 quality fighting. But that's a cursed problem, because as soon as you have Street Fighter 2 quality kind of one-on-one fighting in a brawler, it falls apart, because it's impossible to have that especially as multiplayer. You can't someone's going to have to be in this kind of dazed state where getting the crap kicked out of them, otherwise it doesn't feel right as a brawler, but otherwise it doesn't have the same intricacies as a one-on-one fighting game. I can't remember all the intricacies of it, but it's a really good talk. It's worth kind of looking into, because it shows how Street Fighter 2 and Final Fight have a lot of similarities, but you can't really marry the two together without creating something which is just fundamentally broken.
I 100% agree. Fighting one-on-one fighting games and fighting brawlers, as they're known, are, even though they both have fighting in them, they mechanically are quite different.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people actually appreciate, as you say, that a lot of early game designers think this would be a great idea, but you have to appreciate these are 2 different games. The only thing close to that maybe is Guardian Heroes. So in Guardian Heroes, they have special moves and they have fight systems, but that's taken from their earlier game, which is Yu Yu Hakusho on Mega Drive. Has the same fight system that Treasure made, and they've taken it forward and put it into a side-scrolling brawler, Guardian Heroes, which is also wonderful. But
I need to play that. I've not played it. I need to
oh,
play
you need to play Guardian Heroes. That's a wonderful game. And if you have time, play Yu Yu Hakusho on the Mega Drive as well, which is their previous game, which is a one-on-one fighter up to 4 players at the same time, which is a great fighting game. All right, back to Street Fighter. So we talked about obviously the level of depth you need to go into for the fight mechanics of the game. Are there any other things? Any other things in Street Fighter 2 that just blow your mind? Are just wonderful for you?
Well, I speaking as like the 14-year-old me, like just the lore of Street Fighter 2 was brilliant. I went all in. Like the whole idea of like it being like this magical tournament that was brought out by like M Bison and his like kind of shadowy and nefarious underworld gang. It's like, what's that all about? And then like you're reading the backstories of everyone, and it's like, oh, it's like so Chun-Li's like an undercover cop or something. What? And then like you've got like Ryu and Ken is like this kind of like they're best friends, but they're also kind of like mortal enemies almost. And they've got like this kind of weird kind of mentors and stuff, like all that kind of stuff. I was like, this is the best story ever. And I was like, why is there not a movie of this? And then they keep making movies, and I'm going, this is why there's not a movie of this. But I really love that. Like I used to like play the game, but always been like looking for like background details that kind of fed into this larger story. Even if they weren't really there, like I still looked for them. There was and what this is just kind of jumping around a little bit, but I used to love like there was all these kind of stories about hidden features in Street Fighter 2. Especially the very first iteration where like no one really knew like if you could play as the last 4 bosses or not, and you thought, oh well, maybe like if you complete the game in a certain order, you don't take like damage, like that's when it unlocks, and you get like hear these rumors, and you play the game obsessively try to get like, okay, but just don't get hit for the entire game. And then I defeat the last person on like double KO or something. Then I get to play as like Vega. And it's like, oh, I don't. Oh man, that was such a wasted like month of my life, but it wasn't because I got really good at Street Fighter. But like all these secrets, and there's like a fire extinguisher in the back of Zangief stage, and I swear someone said you could pick that up and use it, and I was like, what? Like it had every single possible like combination of events and make it happen. You can pick up the fire extinguisher. It's never been a thing, but like I just like the idea that there was so much kind of mystery behind this game. Like it created this own kind of like universe for itself where it felt like all these like different outcomes could happen, all these like kind of like hidden experiences. If you just keep pushing, you'll find like that hidden edge, and you can kind of like sneak behind it. So good, man. But yeah, that was that for me. Like the kind of lore of the world. Like I thought it was great. Like it was every other fighting game before that point was kind of like there are some people. Who do you want? Do you want generic guy 1 or generic guy 2 or token girl 3? It's like, oh,
Yeah,
whatever. Doesn't really matter. Whereas every character in Street Fighter felt different. They felt unique. They had like a completely different moveset. Like
yeah.
you need completely different strategies to play as them. Like douse him. Douse him. Where did he come from? Like just all the bendy limbs. This is just insane. Like I didn't like nothing like that had existed before. Like yeah, Kung Fu had like different characters, yes, but like nothing on the scale of Street Fighter 2. Blanca, what's Blanca about? He's got electricity. Why? It's all green. Why? This is mad. Yeah, it's just I really really appreciated like the amount of like kind of thought they'd put into the characters. I really felt like everyone was really for a game which has like minimal kind of like text or dialogue or anything. It really felt like they'd fleshed out a whole like kind of world and characters to exist in that world, which I think at that point in time was still quite rare as far as computer games went.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I have to agree with that. Especially with fighting games, as you say, fighting games you're usually one character and a bunch of random bad guys you fought against them. But this had a roster of 8 characters. You could play with all 8, and also you had the 4 boss characters as well, which came in later. And everyone, as you said, has their own backstory, has their own fighting style. They were, I guess, quite generic in terms of their looks.
They
Maybe
were
generic.
heavily stereotyped.
Setup, so but yeah, stereotype. Yeah, for sure. But it made them very identifiable and memorable. And
yeah, I heard that like they came up with the origin country of the characters first before the characters themselves.
Yeah,
It was quite interesting.
That's what I heard as well. Yeah. So yeah. So we did someone from Spain. What would they look like? And they went with the Matador, and they made it. And then obviously Vega became a thing with his mask and his claw. Yeah, it's just wonderful. The design. Um, I believe the team was heavily artist based. They had way more artists,
Yeah,
and that obviously gave it a lot more flair. And the level of animation that we're using was incredible.
yeah,
Going back to actually what someone said earlier about animation, I understand trying to make a game animate well but also feel responsive is really difficult. If you look at a
yeah,
few other
yeah,
fighting games like Dragon, the Bruce Lee story,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
Shaq Fu, and a few other games like that had wonderful animation, but they play terribly because
yeah.
the animation is at the detriment of the gameplay itself.
Yeah, it's incredibly tricky balance. Like on the most basic level, I had that kind of problem when I was making Fist of Awesome. But like that game was so kind of abstract in its art style anyway. Like if anyone hasn't seen it, Fist of Awesome has like basically Atari 2600 level graphics with slightly more colors. Which meant you could take a lot of kind of like you didn't have to worry about kind of like blending from like this pose to like the fully extended fist. You just did it, and like it doesn't really matter. And it goes back, it just snaps. It doesn't make a difference. But like if you want to make a game that feels fluid, there needs to be in between frames at some point. But like where you choose those frames to be inserted, like massively affects the feel of the game. It's like you can have like really fluid looking animation, but it feels horrible and laggy. And then obviously in Street Fighter 2, like there must have been a lot of back and forth between like the kind of gameplay designers or programmers and the artists and that, animators creating that work to make it feel like, well, yo, we need to do a punch here, but it needs to be like instant. And they go, okay, well, we can make it just go boom straight there. But then there's a kind of like the little kind of aftertouch, so you can kind of like see like the impact afterwards. So it isn't just like this kind of like instantaneous like animation thing. There is like kind of like it feels like there's real force behind that movement. Um, yeah, like I'm not an animator, so I don't know
Sure,
all the kind of intricacies of that, but I do know it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not
sure.
something that happens by accident. It's something that needs to be like really thought about.
There's a wonderful GDC talk actually from the lady who's the animator for a fighting game called Skullgirls. And
Oh
Skullgirls
yeah,
has
it's a great game.
wonderful animation, and she talks about again making the moves feel snappy and how much detail you want to put into the animation to make it still look good, and she nails it perfectly. And it's incredible how difficult that is. Like, yeah, I keep thinking about all the fighting games that had beautiful animation but are just terrible to play. And for me,
Rise
gameplay
the
is most
Robots,
pulling. Rise the Robots,
one of the best fighting games of all time.
for sure, for sure. Um, so Street Fighter 2, we touched on earlier about how wonderful it is to play against another player, because obviously a lot of the earlier fighting games it was just versus the computer.
Yeah.
To be able to play another player changes the dynamics so much. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, like most of my time playing Street Fighter 2 has been spent like, playing against the CPU, just because like where I've been living or wherever my kind of like the circumstances are. But the few times in my life where like I've had like the opportunity to play against other people who are equally like of the same level as me as Street Fighter 2, like those are some of the best times of my life playing computer games. Sorry, guess for.
No problem.
When I first moved into England to Leamington Spa for my Codemasters job, I moved into a house share, and there was a few people who used to come along to the other people who lived in the house share who were ardent Street Fighter 2 fans, like all the Street Fighter range, so like Street Fighter 2, Capcom v Street Fighter, X-Men v Street Fighter, all those kind of different variations they had. And that was so much fun, man. Like that was in the Dreamcast as well. So the Dreamcast had like all these brilliant arcade ports. And that was like one of my kind of best times of playing fighting games, playing all the Street Fighter games, like in this kind of like this little flat in Leamington Spa. And like I was just starting out as a game developer as well, so like I was kind of like learning how to make games during the day, and then I was like playing Street Fighter all night. Like it was a great time, man. I really can't say that didn't affect me like heavily, and like just think I made the right choice in my life at this point. Um, and like back when I was like 14 as well, like go to like play against my friends but be so much better than them. Whereas like in my life, I was rarely better than anyone at anything. But Street Fighter 2, man, that was the one thing. I could dominate. Um, and maybe it wasn't as good experience for them
Yeah.
because of that. Just yeah, get out, life changing. But that's the good thing about Street Fighter, though. Like, it does give this opportunity to go one on one against other people and really test your skills. It's great.
I found the if you look at something like Mario Kart, the newer ones have put in rubber banding to help make the game closer. Because obviously, as you found in Street Fighter, if one person dominates another person, it gets to the point where it's no longer fun for either person. You need to have matches that are close together. As a game designer,
like actually one of the good features. Oh,
sorry,
no.
I was going to say, as a game designer, what would you do to help in a fighting game to help balance that?
Well, one of the things they do in like the home versions of Street Fighter 2, like because I remember like I used this quite a lot, was you could kind of like change each player's level separately. So like a handicap, that's what it's called, like a handicap. So like I could like give myself a handicap of 1, and like my friend would have a handicap of 10. So like I do like 1/10 of the damage they do or something.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gave people like a fighting chance. So I thought that was really clever. There's lots of other kind of like techniques you could use, like maybe slow down the inputs for the kind of like the handicap player, or I don't know. That's pretty much the main things. You don't want to make it like not fun for the person who's trying to fight with the handicap, but like lower health bars to start with and stuff. Like there's lots of different ways you can do it. But yeah, it's definitely necessary to have a way to kind of level the playing field, so people with different skill levels can still enjoy playing against each other. You don't have that in the arcade.
Yeah, I know like some of the later Street Fighters, like the Marvel vs. series, you have easy modes where it's a lot easier to perform special moves, like maybe one button or 2 buttons, and that way it makes, again, just levels the playing field a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. How are we doing for time? 38 minutes in on the camera. Okay, is there anything else you want to talk about Street Fighter? Any other points you want to raise?
I had a really good experience once. I went on holiday with my grandparents to, I think it was Mallorca, and like in the basement of this like hotel we stayed in, there was a bootleg Street Fighter 2 game. I think it was. I'm not really sure. Like my brain tells me it's the Rainbow Edition, just because I think I've heard that there's a Rainbow Edition. It may not have been that, but you could do like you could do fireballs while you were jumping and stuff, and you could do infinite fireballs. Like you didn't have to wait to recharge. You could just go fireball, 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 and the entire screen just filled it with fireballs. And so every single morning of that holiday, it must have been like maybe I think it was like 15 or something. I'd go straight downstairs to the basement, like because like every day they switch off the arcade machines and switch them back on, and like I think the battery they had to save the high scores just was like broken, and obviously no one ever fixed it. And so every day the high scores were wiped. So my first thing I did every single day was go downstairs and put myself like play the game, fireball the heck out of it, and like get to the top of the leaderboard and put my initials in. And that was my holiday, was just like every single day making sure I was top of the leaderboards. It was really fun.
That's wonderful. So yeah, all these weird bootleg versions. After I think Champion Edition came out, you had this like Rainbow Edition, Red Edition, and all these weird other editions with weird names. And then Capcom obviously released Hyper Fighting as a response to that, for their own upgrade to Champion Edition, and that was only within the year, I believe, released that. How do you think having unlimited fireballs and things like that obviously changes the balance, and does it make it still fun, or is it just the weirdness of it?
Yeah, like it is in a way it's fun, but like it's clearly broken. Like it's kind of like when you enable, when you get a connection with the cars, like back in the old days, or you find like a cheat code or something now to give yourself unlimited health. Like it's kind of fun, but like it does ruin the game in a lot of ways. Like suddenly, like there's no challenge. It's fun going, look how much chaos I can cause. Like when you're playing Grand Theft Auto, like Grand Theft Auto has many like reasons why it's excellent, but one of the most fun things is just going, you know what, I don't care anymore, let's just hijack all the police cars and see how many like people we can get chasing us, and then like jump into a helicopter and make everything explode. And then like the game just goes, okay, good job, now please just go back to normal. Don't do that again. And I quite like that. It kind of lets you like have this kind of blowout, and like that's kind of what these rainbow editions and bootlegs are for me. Like they're just blowouts. Like they're not the normal way you play the game. Like it's fun for a second, but like you can tell why Street Fighter 2 doesn't let you do those things, because it's not like it doesn't provide a lasting challenge if you can just like obliterate everyone with like screens full of like infinite fireballs.
For sure.
But it is fun as a little kind of blowout.
And that's what it comes down to, isn't it? It's about having fun and enjoying it at the end of the day. All right.
Yeah.
So that's probably, we're going to probably end that there. And I want to ask you, is there anything that you're working on at the moment, or anything you want to highlight?
I wish I could. So like I work on a Space Ape Games in London, and one of the frustrating things about that is like I'm working on projects that I'm just not allowed to talk about.
Top
like,
secret stuff.
Honestly, it's some of the best I've ever worked on in my entire life. Like so exciting, but can't talk about any of it. But
Okay.
we're hiring, so I can talk about that. So if you make games and you want to come make games somewhere special, help Space Ape.
And if people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
So I've got my own website, ifightbears.co.uk, which is a little bit outdated now, but it has like most of the games that I've worked on in my kind of indie days. So go there, you can find out what's in the games. Follow me on Twitter at Nicoll Hunt. I tweet maybe once every month, but usually it's a very good tweet, so it's like quality over quantity. Yeah, those are the two places. I started a TikTok channel. I wouldn't recommend following that. I did one dance. I'm not a dancer. I'm not 14. It's not for me. But I'm there. But don't follow me, please.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Nicoll, for having coming along and chatting to us about Street Fighter. It was wonderful to talk about that. Yeah, great. Love that game so much. And thank you everyone for listening to Game Dev Game Loves from Game Dev London. And you guys stay awesome.